All right, let's roll. So, Wealthy Agent webinar. Going back to the mall analogy that we used, where are we? Today, we are on business growth. So we're going to focus on a topic that is directly connected to how you grow your business. And does anybody know where? There's a stat, and I don't remember it exactly, so I'm going to give you the gist of it, but it is something like, I believe it's 78% of the business that top agents do come from just 3 places. Those 3 places are database, open houses, and internet leads. Now, internet is a big net. Internet can mean Google pay-per-click. It can mean aggregators. It can mean social media, right? There's a lot that falls under that umbrella. Yet at the end of the day, those 3 things make up the vast majority of the transactions that an agent does. So think about it like this. If I'm going to dive into a pool, it would make sense to dive into the deeper end. It's going to be a much more comfortable landing and a much more pleasurable experience, if you will, right? That's the deep end. So if we're looking to grow our business, looking at those 3 things would be a good place to start. And somebody unmute, of all those things, what is the one thing that matters the most in our business?
Database.
Thank you. Database. So we're going to do a database assessment. We're going to look at our databases. We're going to do some math, and we're going to evaluate the value of our database. And the value of our database, let's get into the meat of it. We're going to go through these 4 steps. We're going to do the math to determine the value, conversion rate, and the financial opportunity that exists in our database, right? If we're not already there, the mindset that we need to have is we are building an asset, and that asset is our database. For far too long in our industry, people spend an entire career building a business only to retire and walk away from it, or they just never retire, which is perfectly fine if that's a choice. If we're doing that because we're not in a position to be able to retire, that's a different conversation. So we got to look at our database as it is the asset. It is the saleable, tangible thing that we are building that someday we will be able to sell. Right. So number 1, determine the value, conversion, financial opportunity that exists. Number 2 is based on that math and what we find out, do we need to slow the spend? Right. So one of the part of the thing that's really valuable about us owning all of our technology is the insights that we can pull out of it to be able to bring back to the agent population. One of the things that we're seeing is over time, there are so many agents that are building a database off of some form of internet leads that what is happening is their databases are becoming larger, but the reality is the conversion is getting lower and lower. And the reason is we're generating lots of leads, we're plowing the leads in, but then we're picking the low-hanging fruit and we're not communicating in a systematic and consistent way to all of those contacts. So what it's turning into is a whole bunch of fruit that's rotting on the tree, right? So there's opportunity there, but we're not capitalizing on it. So depending on the outcome, when we go through this process, we have to look up and say, should I be spending more money to generate more leads? Or should I be pulling back on that spend and putting the time, energy, effort, and resources into nurturing the contacts that I already have to get the most value out of it that I possibly can? Step 3 is increase the quality of our SOI touches. Right? So the way in which we communicate is going to have a different result, right? The idea of the technology that we built is to be able to communicate to people in a human way at scale. To say communicate in a human way means it's personal. When Patricia reaches out to me, when Patricia sends me an email or sends me a text or whatever the form of communication is, it feels specific and personal to me. Right? Command has been designed to allow us to do that at scale, right? I'll give you a really good example. During the pandemic, we were coaching people to touch your database with a very simple thing, which is a text message. Things are crazy right now. I've been thinking about you, wanted to check in and see how you and your family are doing. That is it. Don't ask for business, anything else. It's a care call to your client. The funny thing is, I started getting those text messages from agents. Now, I get the text message and I go, this is the exact script that people are being coached to send, and it's probably automated. How many of them do you think I replied to? Somebody unmute.
Zero.
100% of them. Do you imagine if Andrew sent me a text message and it was genuinely a personal message and I ignored it? What would that say to Andrew about how I feel about our relationship or his value in my world? I would say I don't value you very much. So even if I think it's highly likely that it was automated, what do? I respond to them. Thank you so much for thinking of me. The family is doing great. How are you? Like, right? And now I'm in dialogue with this agent. I know they started it with a prepared conversation and possibly even automation, yet I'm still compelled to respond. Now, our consumers don't necessarily have that same filter, right? Because most of them are not in businesses where they're managing communication in these kinds of ways. But my point is, even knowing it, I still respond to them. Okay, so the quality matters. And then step 4 is whatever adjustments and pivots we make, we inspect what we expect to ensure that we're getting the result we want, and or we make additional adjustments. So let's start to walk through this. Number 1, in order to understand the value of the investment, we need to understand our current conversion rates and the future opportunities that exist inside of the database. So we're going to go through these steps and we're going to use an example, but I want you guys to pull your real information as realistic as you possibly can as we go through it. So number 1, determine the value from a cost perspective if you had to rebuild your database, right? So we're going to look at your database to say, okay, if I had to start from scratch and create what I have today, what would it cost me to do that? Number 2, determine your current total database conversion rate. And number 3, determine your total database financial opportunity. So in the example we're going to use, we are going to look at a database that has 15,000 contacts composed of all of the things that are usually in our database: leads, contacts that have come from our sphere of influence, our past clients, aggregator leads, CRMs, spend leads, METs, open houses, all the stuff that's in our database. Their CRM ad spend had been running for 6 years, and they closed 221 units for a total volume of 120 million. Okay. So let's look at the math on how we're going to break down this database. So step 1, this is where y'all need to take out your pens, pencils, and put some stuff on paper for us. Number 1, what are the total contacts in the database? Now, the second part of the sentence makes it a little more complicated. Here's what I'm going to ask you to do. If you don't know the answer, just put the total amount of contacts you have in your database for now. What we do want to do is, what are the total amount of contacts in the database, excluding farm and data dumps? So farming and data dumps would be, okay, I purchased the information for a neighborhood of 2,500 homes that I'm farming. Or I purchased some list that I have no relationship with. They have never contacted me. They have never raised their hand on any platform that I engage in. I just bought a bunch of data and put it in. They ask us to remove that because the conversion on that is going to be very different. Okay. For the point of this exercise, if you can't easily decipher the two, what I would do is just look at your database. What are my total contacts? Let's roll with that number. And in the future, you can go back and figure out how to peel that onion a little more. Does that make sense? A couple of head nods. Okay. All right, cool. So number 1, how many contacts do we have? Number 2, we've got to put in, we're evaluating what would it cost if I had to rebuild this thing today, right? So what they give us, which is pretty reasonable, if I were to have to go out and buy this database or pay to recreate this database, they estimate the cost at about $26 a lead. Now, if you take all the different ways that you can generate a lead and what they cost, that's a pretty reasonable average. Inside of Command, we have means of generating leads as low as $2.50 up to $5 a lead, right? Every different lead source is different as to what it costs to generate it, what the conversion ratios are, but you have tools inside of Command to generate them very low. Yeah, if you take 26 as a pretty good estimate of what the average is overall, you're going to write that in that spot. Then the next question is, if you walked away from your database tomorrow, the reality is that database would start slowly, for lack of a better way of saying it, dying, right? What comes out of it would slowly stop. right? So what we're asking is, what is the life expectancy of that database? Right? Like, how long is that database going to produce the result? Here's a different way to explain that. In business, when we evaluate a business, it's usually based on a multiple. So what they do, if somebody's buying a business, there is a formula that they look at for that business to say, okay, the formula they usually use is called EBITDA. And basically that's your income and your expenses minus some other more complicated tax stuff. And they go, okay, what's that number? And then every industry, depending on characteristics of your industry and the specific business, they apply a multiple that says this business is worth 3 times EBITDA, as an example. That is a pretty reasonable multiple to use in the real estate industry. A multiple of 3. And here's the reason why. As a broker, someone who owns a brokerage, my greatest asset are human beings who are independent contractors. Without them, I do not have a business. Yet, I don't own them. They're independent contractors. So the reality is it reduces the multiple of what my business is worth because I don't control my greatest asset. As an agent, it's the exact same idea. Your greatest asset is your database. You don't control the database. The consumer can choose to do business wherever they want. So a business like that is going to have a smaller multiple. It is usually around 3 is a reasonable multiple for that. Other types of business like SaaS internet businesses, they could have multiples of 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right? Because it's a different kind of business where there's more control and more consistency theoretically. Does that all make sense so far? Okay. So what we have right now is total number in the database, cost per lead, and we have our multiple. Next, we're just going to do the math. So we take our 15,000 in our example, we multiply that by $26 per contact, our average cost to go out and recapture that lead. That's going to give us, in our case, $390,000 times a multiple of 3 gives us 1.17 million. This is a very simple way of running analysis on a database like any other business would run an analysis on the value of their business. In this scenario, it says that business, that database itself, has a value of 1.17. Now, the question at the bottom of the slide is, are we treating our database like it's $1 million asset? Okay, I see one person saying, no, I won't call out their name yet, right? That's the point of doing this, is looking at it and going, okay, have I really thought about my database that way? And am I treating it that way, right? Okay, so we got that math. We're going to keep going. Next, determine the current total database conversion ratio. So total contacts in the database, if you're able to parse it out, minus farms and data dumps. If not, use the total for right now. You can peel the onion later. Okay, total contacts, the total number of transactions you closed last year, right? This is really simple, intuitive math. And then you're going to take the total amount of closed units, you're going to divide it by your total contacts. So you're dividing the smaller number by the bigger number. Total closed transactions divided by number of contacts in my database. That is going to give you a percentage. In this example, that is a 1.5% conversion ratio. So we have our number. In this case, it's a 1.5. Now the question becomes, is that an acceptable return, right? If we're coaching with an agent and we have an agent say, I'm just going to make something up. Like, what's your goal for 2024? I want to close, my goal is to close 50 transactions. Awesome. What did you close last year? I closed 20. Okay, great. We're going to ask another question, because now what we know is this individual we're coaching is here and they want to be here. We got to gather more information to figure out how we help them close the gap. The next question you're going to ask is, do you have a database? If the answer is yes, the next question is, how many people do you have in your database? Reason being, what we're trying to find out is, do you know enough people to be able to do the amount of business that you want to do? If the answer is no, then the next strategy is, how do you go out and create more relationships so that you can be in relationship with enough people to sell the number of houses you want to sell? If you do have enough contacts, then the question becomes, how are you communicating to the database? are you communicating to them in a systematic and personal way such that when they transact, you get the business? Depending on the answers, you're going to coach them in a different direction. One needs to go meet more people. One needs to get into better relationship with their database. All right, next piece. So in this particular example, we're going to look at it and say, okay, we want to determine the total database financial opportunity that exists. In our example, we're going to use a 4% conversion ratio. Again, they didn't pick that number on accident. We cannot guarantee what your conversion ratio is going to be out of a database, but I can assure you when we create examples, those examples are created based on what we see happen inside of agents' databases that are being worked properly. So we already know what we're getting. Now we're just doing the what could we get math. Total number of contacts times, I would use the 4% number, times 4%. How many closed units does that give us? At this point, I would love a couple people who don't mind being honest and transparent. If you're comfortable, I would love for a few people to unmute and share what is the actual output of your database last year and what's the potential.
Well, mine was 12.
12 is
have-
what
I have-
closed out of it last year.
I have what closed out of it last year, 12.
Okay, what's the potential?
The potential, I have 602, so my potential on my database is 46,956. So when I multiply that by 12, it gives me 0.02. And then
Can I
when I
pause you?
go ahead.
Can I pause you and walk through the math a little bit with you?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so you have how many people in your database?
602.
602. So in this case, we're just taking 602 times
27.
4%.
Oh, right there. So it's
So it's 602 contacts times 4% equals 24 transactions.
yep.
So the
24.
potential value of your database is 24 closed transactions times whatever your average sales price is. Do you mind sharing what your average sales price is?
Sure, hold on. Let me pull up my goals.
Sure.
Where am I? My average sales price, where am I? My average sales price is 372 on the sell side. And then 405 on the, 372 on the sell side and 405 on the buy side. Opposite. My listings are 405 average, my buyers are 372.
All right, so I'm gonna go, just to make math easy for me for right now, I'm gonna call it 390 average. So that's 9.4 million in potential opportunity based on a 4% conversion and the number in the database. Right, so now what we're able to do with that math is go back and go, well, how many units did I close? How much GCI did I generate? The gap between those two things, that's our opportunity gap. That's the business that it exists within our database that we're not currently capturing. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah. So it's really interesting. There was a company that I ran a beta test with years ago that took it took an agent's database and they would layer their software over it to provide seller scores, who's most likely to sell, so that you could prioritize who you were contacting within your database. By the way, you didn't hear this from me. That technology is coming for command. Cassie, I never said that. Okay, and don't ask anybody when it's coming because you didn't hear that because I didn't say it, even though this is being recorded and you're going to get a copy of it. Anyway, that being said, what was really interesting is one of the services that they had that was sort of, I'd love to say it was a carrot, but it was more of a stick. When you first signed up with them, they would do a database analysis to tell you how many people in your database sold real estate and didn't do it with you. You want to talk about a punch in the gut? taking everybody's database, laying that software over it and going, you closed X, here's all the transactions that closed inside of your database that you did not get. Let's take a look at your communication. When was the last time you talked to them? And you just go, right? It's like that expensive sticky note that you wrote a number on and then lost and didn't call, and then you see a for sale sign go up. So anyways, the opportunity is there. That gives you an idea what that opportunity gap is. Any questions around that to this point? Or any ahas that you want to share from running the math on your database? Somebody's doing this. Is that just a thinking thing? In my family, if you do this, everybody has to do it, because that means there's something that nobody wants to do, and the last person to touch their nose has to do it, like the dishes. Is that what that was?
Not exactly. Mostly just like a thinking thing. My aha right now is I need more humans in my database. My conversion rate is good, but my number of humans is not enough to get me where I want to go.
Which is great, because now you have the awareness, and now you know where to focus your time, energy, effort, and resources. I have to focus on more relationships so that I know enough people to do the amount of business I want to do. It's awesome, right? There's no good or bad to this math. It's just clarity, right? It helps you understand how big is the opportunity and where do I need to focus my time, energy, and effort. So the next question becomes, when you look at that, are we getting the return? So Bailey just shared, when she runs the math, she's got a great return, but there's just not enough people in there, right? So in her scenario, now we need to ask ourselves, should we be slowing our spend? Meaning, do I have more people than I need in my database to do the business I want to do, and I'm just not getting it? That may be a point at which it would be a reasonable business decision to dial back some of what you're spending to generate new leads so that you can lean into the leads that you already have, right? So if you find I have all the contacts I need, but not the conversion ratio, that's a reasonable business decision at that point to put the energy into the nurture. If you find you have the conversion ratio, but not enough people, then it's a reasonable business decision to say, I need to put the time, energy, and resources into having more people, right? So the last piece of this, when we dive into, if what we discover is we have the people, we're just not communicating in a systematic enough way with the right velocity to get the results. Now, how do we parse it out? One of the ways you could do that is go into your database and organize your database by last contact, going from the one that you have contacted last, right? Meaning the longest time since they've been contacted. If you organize your database that way and start working through the database from who's been in my database for the longest time but no contact, that's probably a really good place to start layering in your lead generation time so that you can start to breathe life into those contacts. And as you're doing it, you're going to discover some of those people you have all the information that you need to be able to contact them, and some of them you're going to be missing data, right? So if you're missing data, then the question becomes, okay, how do I get the information that I need so that I can communicate with them appropriately? In a perfect world, we know their name, we know their address, we know their home anniversary, the day they bought their home, we have their email, their phone number, and their birthday. Those are like the 6 key pieces of data that if you have that, you can turn on all the tools inside of your CRM, specifically inside of Command, that's going to allow you to communicate in a personal way at scale if you have all 6 of those data points. As you're going through that, if you find that you have a lot of contacts, but you don't have the data that you need in order to communicate with them correctly, there are third parties, right? There's manual ways in which you can go about searching for that data, but there's also third parties like Likely.ai is an example. Likely.ai is a company that you can send your contacts to. They scrub it against all their databases to get you as much of the missing information as they possibly can. They do also have the ability to cross-reference all of the data from their data points in order to apply seller scores. Who are the people who are most likely to sell now? By the way, an interesting story around that. I shared that I beta tested a software program like this years ago. So I met a guy who started a company that did this in Charlotte, North Carolina, and we became friends. So, he would call me, he would talk about his software, we'd talk about business. One day he called me and he said, "Hey, I'm in town, meeting with a broker. Like, I'd love to catch up, grab lunch." I said, "Sure, love to." So we went to lunch. We're having lunch and he's telling me about his, the upgrades to his app and all the stuff. And we do this now and do that now. And he's like, "Yeah, you got to see this. It's super cool." He's like, I'll use you as an example. Like, watch. He pulls up his app. Now, at this point, I'm living in North Carolina. I have been there for 2.5 years. He puts me in his app and he goes, "Wait a minute." He goes, you're moving." And I was like, "I'm not moving." He goes, "My software says you are 90% moving." And I go, "That's because your software sucks." And I was kidding, of course. Here's the interesting thing, which I did not tell him. It was about a week prior to that my wife and I had the very first conversation about moving back to New England. We didn't change a job. We didn't get divorced. We didn't, like, the triggers you might think of. None of those things happened. We had a conversation in our living room. Now, is it possible my wife went to realtor.com and started searching the next day and that triggered it? It's possible. When I asked him, so I told him his software doesn't work, I'm not moving. 30 days later, I sent him a copy of my listing when it went live in MLS for my house. And he called me immediately and he goes, "I knew it." And I asked him, I said, "But how? What did you know?" His only answer was, "Oh, that's for the smart guys in the back room. I just know it works." The point is, he wasn't wrong, right? And when we beta tested it, one of the first things that we saw is people would come up with high seller scores and you would look and they sold 30 days ago. And people would say, "Well, the software doesn't work. They sold 30 days ago." And you're like, "Well, no. If you had access to the tool 90 days ago, you would have been in conversation with them and that would have been your transaction." Like, that is proving that it works. So anyways, it can be a valuable tool. You can get the data you need and you can also get seller scores. And I never said anything that type of technology is going to be available very soon inside of Command. Okay, next piece. The last piece is increasing the quality of our contacts to our SOI, right? We all know if you mass blast people with recipe cards, okay, you contacted them. Number one, I would ask you, do you want them to think of you when they think of lasagna? I would argue no. So I'm not giving anyone a hard time who's ever sent a recipe card. It was a thing for a really long time. Yet, I would encourage you to communicate with them about things that you are an expert in, that you would want them to contact you when they're thinking about those things, i.e. real estate, whether that's buying real estate, investing in real estate, selling real estate, maintaining real estate, right? That's one of our biggest lost opportunities is we're all in on a client when they're buying. What do we do while they own it? Are we the person they call for everything that they need for their house? I'll give you a really simple script. You close on a transaction and you say, "Andrew, super excited for you and your wife. I'm just going to assume you're married because a guy with a beard like that, he's got to be married," right? So super excited you and your wife have the new house. I don't know if you're going to be happy about this, but just because you closed on the house, I don't actually go away. I'm kind of like a barnacle. I stick. So here's what I'm going to ask of you. Now that you own a house, you're going to need stuff. You're going to need a landscaper. You're going to need a carpet cleaner, a gutter guy, an electrician, a plumber, whatever. Please do me a favor. Don't ever roll the dice on Google. If you need something, call me. I know somebody who I know and trust, or I know someone who knows someone that they know and trust. Call me for anything you need for the house. And by the way, I'm going to check in every now and then just to see how you guys are doing and see if you need anything. Now your quarterly touch is really simple. "Andrew, what's happening, brother? You still growing the beard?" "Yeah, man, still growing the beard." "How's the family?" "Family's good." "Awesome." "House?" "House is great." "Cool. Winter's rolling in. You need a plow guy or are you still going out there and shoveling?" "No, man, I'm still shoveling." "Okay, no worries. Anything you need at all?" "Nope, I'm good." Roughly 30% of the time, they will need something. And they will go, "You know, it's funny you called. We got this thing going on in the kitchen. Do you know an electrician?" "Yeah, absolutely, I do. Let me make a phone call and then I'll introduce you guys." Now, in doing that, every single touch you have quarterly is coming from contribution. Number two, every time they need something, you are now reaching out to your network of contractors to provide them with business. Somebody unmute and tell me what happens when you consistently refer business to a business owner.
They refer
They'll refer
clients
back
to you.
They reciprocate. Yes. So now all of a sudden, you're training your clients to touch base with you for everything they need. You're checking in all the time to see if they need anything, always coming from contribution, which is creating opportunities for all of your contractor network. So now you're giving them business. Now they're calling you to reciprocate. Oh, by the way, what do you think happens when the neighbors, because most of us have a neighborhood chat, Facebook page, text message, whatever it is, WhatsApp, right? And I know in my neighborhood all the time, text messages. Anybody got a garage guy? Anybody got this? Anybody got that? Right? And all of a sudden when they do that, they go, I just call my realtor when I need it. Here's a phone number. Now you're in contact with the neighbors, right? Super, super simple, comes from contribution, right? So quality contacts, right? There's a certain amount in which we can automate. And again, through modern technology, we can provide personal communication at scale. Neighborhood Nurtures is a really good example. It's specific to me, my neighborhood, and my real estate, right? Not generic information. Then it's what are our personal touches when we're actually physically doing something, and what is the quality of that? So here's just an example, right? This is somebody that I thought was genius. I love this. They went out and got the leaf bags and branded it to themselves. And in the fall, they distribute them not only to their clients, but in farm areas. Obviously, the beauty of that is it's valuable to the homeowner. But then what do they do with the bags? Yeah, they put them on the curb. And now you have signs all over town, right? And you have other neighbors who go, where'd you get all the bags? Oh, my realtor sends them to me. But it's free advertising all over the place. It's actually really, really smart. Like somebody shared the story of somebody who did this in a town and there was some issue in the town, budget, whatever the case may be. The bags ended up staying out for months. And they were like, it was hilarious. It looked awful in town. There were leaf bags everywhere, but I had free advertising all over town for months. Right. So what is the quality of the leads? Okay. Or I'm sorry, quality of the contacts. So a couple of things. One, I'm going to open up for any questions, any ahas. Two, there's a QR code at the end of the presentation. I'm going to go to the last slide. If you scan that QR code, we have a takeaway for you. It is a list of 60 unique personal touches that you can go through and pick, get ideas, pick things that, fit you and your personality and how you want to communicate with your clients. But it's like a 3-page document of 60 unique touches for our sphere of influence. All of these came from the top agents in this company that are doing things that they have a lot of success with. So every one of these touches is something that somebody has executed with significant results, right? So they're tried and tested strategies. Make sense? Okay. Couple ahas. What do we got?
Well, Matt, I like this this database analysis because what I've said to myself now is like, oh my goodness, look how much opportunity there is in my database. So so slowing the spend is a good idea. On the flip side of that, what I know is that if I actually had that much business, I need to hire a team.
Which is a great insight to have also.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what I love about that too? It's like, that's an amazing problem to have. So if you look at it and you go, oh my gosh, I wouldn't even be able to handle that business. That's awesome. Go make that problem and then solve that problem. Yeah, it's wonderful. Love that. What else? Andrew, I just about made you the star of this entire webinar. So you got to share a nugget. What do you got, man?
Yeah, no, I was just going to ask you about about that program you were talking about that can tell if somebody's gonna move or sell within 90 days or whatever.
Yeah. So the company is likely.ai.
Is that something that you pay monthly or?
Yeah, so they have a couple different services. You can send your database and they can do the scrub, which is they're going to look for the key data points, and whatever you don't have, they're going to replace them. There's a couple things you need to know. No matter what service you use, nothing is perfect.
Sure.
So believe it or not, I'm not the only Matt Erdmann on the planet. And that's not a very common name. Yet there's more than one of me, right?
Yeah.
So they try to use the data and get it all narrowed down and accurate, but you do have to know you're going to get it. You may have a little bit of cleanup on it, but they're going to
Yeah.
vastly improve the quality of that. So they can do the initial scrub. They can do seller scores, which is they scrub the database, then they cross-reference it against all the different databases they have to look for the triggers that say, you know what, you should call Matt today because data says that Matt's 90% likely to be selling in the next 6 months. So they can do that piece. And then there is a service where they can do a data refresh. Whether you do it on a monthly basis, a quarterly basis, they can do those data refreshes for you. Okay. And there are other companies, likely as just an example of one of them.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah. It's escaping me right now, so maybe somebody will know it. I bet David will know it. Every MLS is different, but some of our MLSs actually have tools built in also that will give you seller scores, right? That are also doing the same thing. They're cross-referencing different data points. So you have the ability to go in and do that, but likely can take the whole thing, pull the data that is missing and do the scores for you. Which, by the way, if you're going to do any kind of mailing, farming, any of that stuff, number one, you have to know with farming. Farming takes a long time to get a result. Like I tell people, if you can't afford to spend for a full 12 months with little to no expectation of what the return is going to be, don't even start farming. It just takes time because you don't know the people and you don't know whether they're interested in selling. So it's a buckshot approach. It takes time on task over time to slowly gain momentum. However, if you want to increase the velocity at which you get a result from any kind of mail, just make it more specific. Narrow it down with data, whether they've lived there, 15 years plus or 13 years plus, whether they have a certain level of equity, things like likely.ai that use seller scores. If you can narrow that data, I'll use the example. I built a flip business and we flipped about 80 houses in 5 years. We did it predominantly through mail. Our biggest driver of business was mail. We just sent out mail. Same letter over and over again. For years, by the way. If you were on my mailing list and I hadn't bought your house yet, you got a letter from me every 90 days and it was the exact same letter. For years. Literally, I would go on an appointment, meet with a homeowner, and at the bottom of the letter, it said, keep this with your house papers. Here's the funny thing. I would show up and there'd be a manila folder on the dining room table and there'd be 37 of my letters in there. Like they actually kept it. I'd be like, that's so funny that you listened. I usually can't get people to listen to me face to face, never mind just sending a letter. But for some reason they listened and they did it. But here's what I wanted you to know. The way we mailed, we just narrowed it down. We started out and we said, okay, what can we afford to spend initially? And then we said, okay, let's pick a geographic area. Great. Okay, what kind of houses do we want to buy? Well, they got to be at least, let's say 1,200 square foot, 3-bedroom, 1-bath. Okay, cool. Single family, cool. Okay, they got to have at least 60 or at least 40% equity. Okay, cool. And we just kept narrowing it down until the list was small enough for us to hit them every 90 days. But if you were getting that letter, what it meant is you owned a house that I would buy and you could sell to me at the numbers that I buy properties if you wanted to. So it was narrowed down from a buckshot to more of a sniper approach. That's where you're going to get a better return from anything. The two things that drive your return on communications like email, mail, any of those things is one, if you get really specific about your avatar and your target, and two, you get really specific about the message. Who am I hitting and what is my message? Delivering a compelling message to communicate with me immediately. That's where you get a bigger return.
Hey, Matt, I have an aha from last week.
What do you got? I love it.
So last week you mentioned those text messages to send, the Zillow text messages.
Mm-hmm.
I sent it to everybody, all of my past clients, every single one, buyers, obviously, every single one of them.
Love it.
And I got an 85% two-way conversation. 85% of them were happy to talk. People who I've texted even about client appreciation event, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, they did not respond. But
Mhm.
when I sent that Zillow text, 85% of them felt like they needed to respond.
85%. When is the last time you got
85%.
85% open rate?
85%.
Not even open rate, response rate.
Respond.
I'm telling you.
Not just, oh, that's great. And then I say something and they don't respond, like conversation back and forth.
Yeah.
And from that 85%, I actually got 2 listing appointments. One that's coming up this Sunday. She had a baby. The property is too small for her now, so she needs a bigger space. So she wants to sell and she wants to buy something bigger. And the other person is getting a divorce, and so they need to sell their property, and then each of them need to buy something separately.
Love, 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 love it.
Amazing.
And by the way,
So,
Rashida, how hard
yeah.
was that?
Oh my gosh, totally so easy. I mean, the hardest part was being distracted to have the two-way conversation while I'm trying to send the rest of my text messages.
Again,
That
that
was the
brings me
hardest
back to Patty. Like, who wants to have that problem? My biggest problem
That-
while I'm trying to lead generate is so many people are responding to me during my
Yeah.
lead gen time that it's hard for me to lead gen.
Exactly.
Like, this is the best problem you could ever have as a real estate agent. Yeah, I'm telling you, it is simple, it is fun, it is easy, and anyone that I have seen actually follow through and execute on it ends up with feedback just like that. I think I shared with you guys, I walked into a room and asked a small group of people to send one of them. I left the room and came back, and the one individual sent it, and one of them, one text, one appointment. They were 1 for 1. So anyways, it's really simple. We're trying to give you really simple tools to get these things done, right? It is human nature to overcomplicate things. It's what we do, right? We give you a simple text message like that, and what do we want to do? We want to change the language. It'll be better if I say it this way. We spend 30 minutes tweaking it, changing the to this and that. Like, just send. Picture, send. Picture, send. Super simple, and you'll get into dialogue.
I literally didn't even identify the person by name. I just screenshot it. I circled this estimate and I sent exactly verbatim what you had. That's it. I didn't even say hi, so and so. I just literally sent that.
Yeah. Cut and paste, cut and paste. And it still feels personal because it's my house and I'm compelled to respond. And now we're in dialogue. Love it. I don't think I shared this the years and years and years ago. And this is the last thing, and then we're going to wrap up. Unless anybody else has any comments or questions. Years ago, when I first started in real estate, I had this platform that I paid for. It was called housevalues.com. Somebody might remember it. This is pre-Zillow days. It was a thing. They advertised it on the TV, and homeowner could put their address in, and it would get sent to an agent who would do a mini CMA for them. So I was paying for this service. It was generating leads. I'm doing all these mini CMAs. It came with a database and follow-ups and all this stuff, and I was doing all this stuff, but nobody was responding. So I don't remember how long, but I was months into it, and I had a bunch of leads that had built up, but just like nobody was engaging with any of the follow-up conversation. And one day I got frustrated and I just selected all in the database, sent an email that said, hey, I'm going to be in your neighborhood for an appointment on Tuesday around 5 p.m. Thought I would swing by and say hello, send. I sent it to every single contact in that database. Now, it's entirely impossible for me to be in every one of their neighborhoods on Tuesday at 5 o'clock. That wasn't my point. My point was to get them to communicate to me. And guess what happened? My inbox went ping, 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 ping. Oh, I'm actually not going to be home. Oh, that's too bad. When's a better time to swing by? Why don't you call me? Let's chat first. Okay, cool. What's a good time to call? This time, here's my number. Great. Like all of a sudden, I had two-way dialogues going back and forth. Like, so anyways, the point is communicate in such a way that it's going to get that two-way dialogue going. And out of those two-way dialogues, just like Rashida just shared, there's opportunity. 1 week, 2 listing appointments. Probably the easiest prospecting she ever did. So, all right. Everybody got the QR code? Thumbs up? Okay. There's a quick sheet to fill out that just gets feedback and all those things. Again, as we continue to do this, you guys are going to start to take control of the topics that we lean into based on the feedback and the conversations that we're having. So remember, this is yours to curate. So the more feedback you give us, the better everything is going to be. See you next week, and do me a favor, same as I always say, If this is valuable, bring a friend next week.
Thank you, Matt.
Absolutely. Happy Tuesday.